The first time anyone noticed the bear cub, it was standing at the edge of the forest, small, fragile, and completely still. It stood there at dawn. Then again the next day. And the next. Locals in the small mountain town of Eagle's Rest had seen their share of wildlife. Black bears were common in the woods nearby. But something about this cub was different. It wasn't afraid. It didn't come to rummage for food or wander through the trees like most young bears. It came to wait. Always at the same spot. Just before sunrise. Just before the yellow school bus passed by on its winding morning route. It never crossed the road. It just sat there, eyes wide, ears twitching, still as stone. Some people ignored it, assuming it was orphaned or confused. Others slowed their cars as they passed, concerned for its safety. Children on the bus whispered about it. The sad cub, they called it. It didn't growl. It didn't run. It just waited. Every morning. No one knew why. The cub's fur was a little too thin for the cold, and its left ear had a nick in it, like it had gotten caught in a fence or a trap at some point. But it looked healthy otherwise. Quiet. Alert. Heartbreakingly alone. Miss Lorna, the local baker, was the first to bring food. She left out berries near the tree line before her shop opened. The cub never touched them. "It's not hungry," she murmured once to a customer. "It's hoping someone will come back." The sheriff posted a notice asking people to leave the cub alone. "It's wild," he said. "We don't want it getting too used to humans." But people still watched from a distance. From porches. From car windows. From inside the bus as they passed. No one dared approach. Some mornings it would stand on its hind legs as if trying to look farther. Other mornings it simply sat, its head tilted in the same direction, toward the empty road, as if expecting someone. Someone it knew. Someone it remembered. And every afternoon, as the bus rumbled by again heading the other direction, the cub was gone. Back into the woods. Always alone. But back again the next morning. This quiet ritual went on for weeks. Then months. Children began leaving drawings of the cub on the bus windows. One little girl tied a red ribbon to the tree where it sat. The cub sniffed it once, then sat down beneath it as if it recognized something in the scent. Whispers began to spread. "Do you think it's waiting for a person? Maybe it's the ghost of a girl's old pet. No, maybe it was rescued and taken away, and now it came back." Even old Mr. Holbrook, the retired forest ranger who hadn't believed in emotion or sentimentality in years, found himself slowing his pickup every morning just to check. "That cub," he muttered once, lighting a pipe, "has the look of grief in its eyes." Something unspoken, unspeakable, hung in the air around it. A sense of longing so deep it quieted even the wind. And no one knew, not yet, that what that cub was waiting for wasn't just a memory. It was a promise. One made long ago. One not yet kept. 2 years earlier, in the deep dripping silence of late spring, Sophie Langston had found the bear cub half dead in the woods. She had only just turned 12, wild-haired, bright-eyed, and braver than most adults in Eagle's Rest. While most kids spent their weekends inside with games and phones, Sophie roamed the woods behind her grandmother's cabin, cataloging bird calls and pressing leaves into journals she rarely showed anyone. That day, she had been following a deer trail, notebook in hand, when a low, broken cry stopped her in her tracks. It wasn't the high-pitched squeak of a squirrel or the sharp yap of a fox. This was different, raw, scared, and weak. She followed the sound, heart thudding. Every step took her deeper into a part of the forest she didn't usually go, where the trees hung low and moss blanketed the rocks like sleeping animals. Then she saw it. A small black bear cub, barely the size of a cocker spaniel, was curled into a ball between the roots of a fallen tree. Its left ear was torn, its fur matted with mud and dry blood. It looked up at her, too weak to stand, but not afraid. For one suspended moment, they simply looked at each other, one young girl, one dying creature. And then Sophie knelt beside it and whispered, "I'm not going to hurt you." She took off her jacket and wrapped the cub gently, careful not to touch the wounded ear. It didn't resist. Didn't growl or claw. It just let her carry it, one slow shaking step at a time, back through the forest, to her grandmother's cabin. Mrs. Langston, fierce and no-nonsense, had nearly dropped her mixing bowl when Sophie came in cradling a bear cub. "For heaven's sake, Sophie." "I think it's dying," Sophie said. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes were brimming. And just like that, everything changed. They called wildlife services, but the nearest rescue facility was hours away, and snow had fallen unexpectedly the day before, blocking the main road. So they did what they could. They kept the cub warm by the fireplace, fed it goat's milk mixed with honey and crushed berries. They tended to its ear with salve and bandages, and whispered to it softly as it slept fitfully through the nights. Sophie named it Togo, after the legendary sled dog she'd read about. A survivor. A fighter. Over the next 10 days, something incredible happened. The cub began to improve. It took its first wobbly steps from its blanket pile. It nuzzled Sophie's sleeve when she sat beside it. And one afternoon, as the snow melted outside, Togo licked her hand, slow and certain, as if he understood something deeper than words. By the time the wildlife officers arrived, Togo was stronger, still limping, but alert and aware. They examined him carefully and said he would likely survive, but couldn't stay. Human contact was dangerous. The bond forming between him and Sophie was already too strong. "He'll need to be transferred to the sanctuary upstate," one officer said. "They'll prepare him for wild release." Sophie nodded. She understood. She didn't cry until that night, when she slipped outside in the dark and sat beneath the tree by the road, hugging her knees. Togo was loaded into a crate the next morning. He didn't whine. Didn't struggle. But his dark eyes searched for Sophie as they carried him away. "I'll see you again," she whispered. "I promise." She meant it. But life moved on. The seasons turned. Sophie went back to school. Her friends never really understood why she got quiet when people mentioned bears, or why she started drawing them in the corners of her notebooks, always with a nicked ear. But when winter returned, and a young bear cub began showing up each morning at the edge of the road, she knew. Even if no one else believed her. It was Togo. Waiting. Just like she had once waited for him. At first, no one noticed. It was just a rumor, a bear cub spotted near the school bus stop, close to the woods. Some said it was a trick of the fog, others said a dog. No one took it seriously. Except Sophie. She saw him for the first time in late October, as she stood near the end of the gravel road, waiting for the yellow bus to come rumbling over the hill. The wind had turned sharp that morning, chasing dry leaves across the roadside. She rubbed her gloved hands together and looked toward the trees. And there he was. About 15 yards back, half hidden behind a cluster of birches. Sitting. Watching. Her heart leapt. Even from that distance, even with the shadows, she saw it, the faint nick in his left ear. The same eyes. The same posture. Togo. She didn't say anything. Didn't wave or call out. Just looked at him, and smiled. The next morning, he was there again. And the next. Every school day without fail, Sophie would walk to the road, and Togo would already be there, waiting just out of reach. Never closer than 10 yards. Always still. Always watching. A quiet, gentle presence. She began bringing extra fruit in her bag, apples, blueberries, once even half a sandwich, and would leave it near a fallen log at the tree line. By the time the bus came back in the afternoon, it would be gone. But Togo never approached her. Never crossed the invisible line between wild and human. It was as if he remembered the rules. Yet the bond between them deepened in silence. Her grandmother began to notice how Sophie lingered longer at the stop, how she returned with wind-blown hair and a softness in her eyes. One day, she followed from a distance and saw the bear cub, sitting like a statue in the woods, unmoving as Sophie stood nearby. She said nothing, but her expression turned both wary and wistful. When Sophie's classmates eventually heard about it, as stories do in small towns, the reactions were mixed. "Are you sure it's the same bear?" "That's dangerous, sophomore." "It's cute, but it's still wild." She didn't argue. Didn't explain. Some things didn't need defending. The local newspaper even ran a small piece. Young bear seen following school route, officials monitoring behavior. It stirred mild concern, but no immediate action. The wildlife rangers observed from a distance, noting the bear's passive demeanor. Non-aggressive. Predictable. Calm. Still, Sophie worried. If someone got scared, if something happened. But nothing did. Fall deepened. The forest blazed gold and crimson. Togo grew larger, stronger, but never lost his calm watchfulness. Once, during a heavy rain, Sophie didn't expect to see him. Yet there he was, soaked, sitting beneath a tree like a monk in meditation. They had become each other's quiet routine. Every morning, Sophie, Togo, the waiting, the parting. And though no words were ever spoken, no contact made, it was one of the most meaningful friendships Sophie had ever known. Sometimes, she would whisper stories to the wind, hoping he heard. About school, her drawings, the dreams she had, to work in conservation, to help wild animals heal the way she once helped him. And sometimes, she swore she saw him react, a blink, a head tilt, a slow exhale like a sigh. "I know you remember," she once murmured. "I can feel it." And maybe that's what made it all the more heartbreaking when, one icy morning in late November, Togo didn't come. The frost clung to every surface that morning, delicate white veins lacing the porch rail, the grass, even Sophie's windowpane. Her breath clouded the air as she zipped up her coat and stepped outside, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She walked the familiar path toward the road, her boots crunching lightly on frozen leaves. The sun had barely begun to rise, casting a sleepy pink glow on the tops of the trees. She knew the routine by heart. She knew where he'd be, just beyond the fallen log, tucked near the birch trees. Always watching. Always waiting. But today, the spot was empty. Her pace slowed. She looked left, then right. Squinted into the shadows. Nothing. She waited, hands gripping the straps of her backpack. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Still nothing. The bus came. Its brakes hissed as it pulled up beside her. She climbed on slowly, looking back over her shoulder one last time before taking her seat by the window. The forest stared back in silence. At school, Sophie couldn't focus. Her mind kept drifting, eyes scanning outside every classroom window, searching for some distant movement, anything. During lunch, she confided in her best friend Mia. He wasn't there this morning. Mia looked up from her tray. Maybe he slept in. Sophie forced a smile. He's never missed a day. The next morning, she went earlier. Still no sign of him. No paw prints in the frost. No disturbed snow. No half-eaten berries. The log was untouched, her offerings ignored. The third day, she ran to the spot before dawn, flashlight in hand, boots soaked with melted frost. Still empty. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions. Was he hurt? Had someone scared him off? Was he gone? She tossed and turned, the weight of unknowns pressing down like snow on her chest. She remembered the newspaper article from weeks before, officials monitoring behavior. Had someone decided he was too close? Too tame? Had someone taken him? She finally slipped out of bed and padded down the hall to her grandmother's room. "Nana," she whispered, voice shaking. "Togo's gone. He hasn't come back in days." Her grandmother sat up slowly, turned on the lamp. "Oh, sweetheart." She opened her arms, and Sophie collapsed into them. "I should have done something. Kept him safe. Told someone. Anything." Her grandmother rubbed her back gently. "You did everything right. He's a wild creature, love. They come and go with the wind. Maybe he moved on." Sophie shook her head, tears warm against her cheeks. "No. This wasn't like that. I felt something was wrong." The following weekend, she begged her grandmother to drive her to the edge of the forest, deeper than they'd ever gone. She wore her red jacket, the one he'd always seen her in. She brought a basket of apples. A whistle. Hope. They walked in silence for nearly an hour. No tracks. No coals. No bear. Just wind in the trees and the bitter sting of absence. Eventually, her grandmother knelt beside her in the snow. "We need to go back, Sophie." And so they did. Empty basket. Heavy hearts. That night, as the wind howled outside and the windows trembled, Sophie sat at her desk and stared at the drawing pinned to the corkboard, a rough sketch of a bear cub, sitting beneath a tree, staring out toward the road. She reached for her pencil and wrote in the corner, "Where did you go?" Then, underneath in smaller letters, "Please come back." She left her window cracked that night, just in case he was out there listening. But no paw steps came. And in the quiet stillness of the early morning, Sophie felt the ache of a bond fraying without goodbye. Sophie became a different version of herself after that. Quieter. Focused. She still went to school, still smiled when she had to, but her heart wandered miles away, deep into the woods. She had to know what happened to Togo, even if it broke her. She started keeping a journal, mapping where he had last been seen, noting weather patterns, paw print locations, food she'd left behind. She turned to online forums, reading about bear migration, instincts, and what might scare them off. One day, in the town library, she overheard something. Two older boys were talking near the wildlife section. One said, "That bear's gone, man." Ranger said they tranquilized it. Sophie froze. "Too friendly," the other added. "People were feeding him. Hanging out with him. Made him too soft." She waited until they left, then ran to the front desk. "Which ranger comes to Pine Hollow?" she asked breathlessly. The librarian looked surprised. "Usually Ranger Ellis or that younger one. Carter." "Why?" "I just wanted to ask about wildlife reports. For school." The librarian smiled. "Such a curious girl. Good for you." That evening, Sophie biked all the way to the ranger station near the preserve. The sun was already dipping behind the hills, painting the sky in fire-orange streaks. A single light was on inside. She knocked. Ranger Ellis answered, eyebrows raised. "Sophie, right? Marion's granddaughter." "Yes, sir." Her voice trembled. "I need to know what happened to the bear cub. The one that used to wait by the road every morning." His face shifted, jaw tightening. "Come in," he said gently. Inside, the station smelled like pine and old coffee. Papers rustled on the desk. A worn map of the region hung on the wall, pins and notes cluttering one corner labeled, "Human Conflict Incidents." "I shouldn't be telling you this," Ellis said as he poured her some warm cocoa. "But you're part of this whether you realize it or not." He sat down across from her. "We tagged that cub 6 months ago. Quietly. After people in town started noticing how close he'd gotten to you." Sophie's eyes welled up. "You tracked him?" Ellis nodded. "Yes. At first, it was to monitor safety. But then, things changed. We picked up a signal last week, way off route. A poacher's trap zone. Deep in the forest near the old lumber site." Sophie gasped. "Is he alive?" Ellis hesitated. "We don't know. The tag signal went dark 2 days ago. Could mean the battery failed, or someone removed it." Her hands clenched around the mug. "I want to go there," she said. "Show me where he was." "Sophie. Please." The next morning, Ellis drove them in a dusty green truck, the forest growing denser with every mile. The road turned to gravel, then to packed snow. Finally, they reached a ridge overlooking a half-frozen stream. "This is where the tag last pinged," he said, pointing toward the gorge. Sophie got out, her boots crunching through the snow. The air was sharp with pine and old, unseen secrets. She wandered down the slope, heart racing. Every step felt like she was closer to something, though she didn't know what. Then she saw it. A broken wire trap, partially hidden beneath snow and leaves. Blood dotted the ground nearby, not fresh, but not too old either. Next to it, something glimmered faintly in the snow. She reached down. It was a leather strap. Her old red backpack strap. Her breath caught. "This was mine, from last spring." Ellis came down beside her, his brow furrowed. "How did this get out here?" Sophie's mind reeled. She remembered giving it to Togo to play with one day. He'd loved tugging it like a dog toy. He must have brought it with him. Held on to it. As if carrying a piece of her with him on his journey. Tears blurred her vision. He hadn't just wandered. He was looking for something. Someone. Her. Back at home that night, Sophie pinned the leather strap next to her drawing. The caption underneath? "He remembered me." And suddenly, despite the ache, she knew something else. If he remembered her, he'd try to come back. And she would wait. Every single day. Spring returned to Pine Hollow in gentle waves. Snow melted into streams that sang softly through the forest. Buds unfurled like secrets on every branch, and the world began to breathe again. But Togo did not return. Weeks passed. Sophie waited every morning at the usual bend in the road, her eyes scanning the woods beyond the bus stop. Every crack of a twig, every flutter of wings, made her heart lurch. Nothing. Her grandmother, Marion, watched quietly from the porch some mornings, a steaming cup of tea in her hands. "You still believe he'll come back?" she asked gently one day. Sophie nodded. "He's not gone. Not forever." Marion didn't argue. She simply said, "Then I'll believe it too." It was a school morning in late April. The sky had turned silver with a spring drizzle. Sophie stood at the bus stop, jacket pulled tight, bag slung over one shoulder, the leather strap from Togo still tied to the zipper. Her classmates chatted behind her. But Sophie stared out at the tree line. And then, the woods rustled. She held her breath. At first, it was just the underbrush shifting, like it always did. But then, between the branches, a shape emerged. Massive. Familiar. Togo. Soaked. Thinner than she remembered. But it was him. Their eyes locked. For a moment, time forgot to move. He didn't come running. He stood at the edge of the forest, unsure, cautious. But Sophie took a step forward. "Togo," her voice cracked, barely a whisper over the rain. The bear tilted his head, ears flicking. A second passed. Then he let out a soft, guttural huff, the same sound he used to make when she brought him apples. She smiled through her tears. He remembered. By now, the children had quieted. A few gasped. One ran back toward the house. Sophie didn't move. She slowly crouched, keeping her distance, lowering herself like she used to when they first met. Togo ambled closer, slowly, steadily, powerful yet gentle. When he was just a few feet away, he stopped. She could see the scar on his hind leg, a mark from the trap. She wanted to cry, to run to him, to scream with joy. But she stayed still. "I missed you," she whispered. "So much." Togo leaned forward slightly, nose twitching. He sniffed the air around her, then lowered his head, letting it rest lightly on the ground between his paws, a sign of complete trust. The same way he used to lie next to her when they'd nap under the big oak tree. Tears streamed down her face. He had come home. By the time Marion arrived with the ranger, Ellis, in tow, the scene looked like a dream. Sophie sitting calmly, the bear lying in front of her like a dog curled near his favorite human. Ellis didn't speak at first. He simply watched. Then he whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." Later that day, with Ellis's help, they examined Togo from a safe distance. He was healthy enough, but clearly worn from his journey. Sophie stayed nearby, soothing him with her voice. Ellis made calls to the Wildlife Rehabilitation Service, explained the situation. They agreed to observe from afar but not interfere. Sometimes, Ellis said, an animal makes their own decision. Togo had chosen his home. From that day forward, Togo became a part of the town in the strangest, most magical way. He didn't roam the streets. He didn't beg for food. But every morning, as the school bus pulled up, Togo would emerge from the woods, sit quietly in the same spot, and watch Sophie leave. Every afternoon, he'd be waiting. Never too close. Always watching. One day, a reporter from a nature magazine came to visit. She took pictures, interviewed Sophie and Marion, even made a short documentary about the bear who waited. It went viral. But Sophie didn't care about fame. She only cared that her friend had returned. Years passed. Togo grew larger, older, as did Sophie. When she graduated from high school, he was there at the edge of the forest, watching quietly from the shade. When she left for college, he didn't follow. But on every return trip home, she found signs. Scratches on the old tree. Paw prints near the porch. A half-eaten apple at the base of her bedroom window. The last time she saw him, she was 23. She sat on the front porch reading when the forest whispered once more. There he stood, grayer around the muzzle, slower in his steps. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They simply looked at one another. A silent promise exchanged. Then Togo turned, and walked back into the woods. He never came again. Sophie eventually wrote a book, The Bear Who Waited. It became a bestseller, taught in schools across the country. But for her, it was never about fame. It was a love letter. To a bear who waited. To a friendship that defied logic. To a bond that outlived seasons.